The roar of the turbines shook the ground like a heartbeat, and the smell of hot oil and scorched rubber hung heavy in the cavernous testing bay of Apex Dynamics. I was on my knees, scrubbing a streak of hydraulic fluid off the polished concrete with a brush that had seen better decades, when the clack of expensive shoes cut through the noise like a knife. "Watch yourself down there," a voice snapped from the catwalk overhead, sharp enough to slice the thick air. "Some things are too complicated for people who only know how to push a mop." Laughter rippled from the suits up top, nervous, performative, the kind that follows a boss who signs the checks. I didn't look up, just kept circling the rag, slow and steady, letting the solvent bite into the stain while my eyes drifted to the sleek prototype drone behind the glass partition. Its carbon fiber wings caught the overhead lights like a promise I used to keep, one I'd signed in blood and salt water years ago. That voice belonged to Cassandra Hale, 33, CEO of the company her grandfather had built from a garage in the 70s with nothing but a welding torch and a dream bigger than the Pacific. She'd taken the reins 8 months earlier after he passed in his sleep, and the board had been circling like vultures ever since, waiting for the kid to crash and burn. So she armored up, ice in her veins, steel in her spine, and started swinging the axe. Budget slashed. Heads rolled. Mercy was a 4-letter word she'd erased from the dictionary. To her, the world split clean, those who commanded the sky and those who crawled beneath it. Once you crawled, you stayed there. No appeals. No second flights. I'd been crawling a while. Name's Jonah Reed, 37, former Navy test pilot. Flew experimental drones that weren't supposed to exist over oceans that weren't supposed to be crossed. Pulled 9G turns that turned the horizon into a blur and the blood in my veins into lead. Saved a squadron over the Pacific when Typhoon Mawar shredded our NAV systems and the rookie on my wing, call sign Sparrow, froze at the stick. I talked him down through lightning that lit the cockpit like a strobe, through winds that tried to fold us like paper cranes. We both lived. My bird didn't. Shrapnel tore through the fuselage on exit. I punched out over Blackwater and floated for 18 hours in a raft that smelled like fear and diesel before a Filipino fishing trawler hauled me in, half delirious, whispering coordinates to ghosts. The spine injury ended my clearance. The Navy gave me a folded flag, a medal I never wore, and a pension that barely covered rent in a 1-bedroom walk-up with peeling paint and a view of a brick wall. My wife, Mara, stuck it out through the surgeries, the nightmares, the nights I woke screaming about water closing over my head and the hiss of oxygen masks that weren't there. Cancer took her 2 years later while I was still learning to walk without a cane, still flinching at the sound of waves on TV. Now I had twin boys, Eli and Noah, 9 years old, freckles across their noses like constellations, obsessed with anything that flew. Medical debt had eaten the savings like rust through aluminum. The only job that let me bring them after school was night shift custodian here at Apex. Same hangar where I once signed off on flight plans in greased pencil. Same smell of jet wash and possibility. Same ghosts in the rafters, whispering my old call sign when the lights dimmed. The boys would sit in the corner with their sketch pads, knees bouncing, drawing rotors and lift vectors they couldn't yet pronounce. One of the junior techs, Luis, started explaining Bernoulli's principle using a paper airplane and a leaf blower he wasn't supposed to have in the bay. I watched from across the concrete sea, bucket in hand, and felt my chest crack open like sunrise over the flight line. Slow, inevitable, blinding. Then came the Tuesday Cassandra found Noah in the restricted wind tunnel gallery. He'd slipped in through an open service door, chasing a blueprint that had fluttered out of a trash bin like a wounded bird. 8 pages of folded gold, classified ducting schematics for the Pegasus 9's variable intake system. He sat cross-legged under the emergency strips, tracing the lines with a sticky finger still dusted with cafeteria cookie crumbs, whispering intake, exhaust, boundary layer, like a prayer to gods who'd forgotten him. Cassandra's heels announced her like gunfire, asterisk, clack, 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 asterisk, each step a verdict. This is a secure area, not a daycare. Noah scrambled up, clutching the pages to his chest like contraband hope. I just wanted to see how it breathed. Do you have any idea what that paper is worth? Her voice dropped to a dangerous hush. More than your entire life. More than 10 of them. I jogged in, lungs burning from the stairwell sprint, apron flapping like surrender. Ma'am, he's with me. It won't happen. Again. She turned the full Arctic glare on me, eyes the color of winter steel. You think proximity to genius rubs off if you scrub hard enough, that mopping the floor puts you in the cockpit. The bay went quiet enough to hear the hum of the ventilation. Techs pretended to study clipboards. Someone coughed a laugh into their sleeve. Sharp, cruel, gone as fast as it came. I took the blueprint from Noah's trembling fingers, smoothed the creases with a thumb that still remembered throttle friction, and set it on a workbench like evidence. Then I let him out, his small hand slick in mine. Halfway down the corridor, he tugged my sleeve. Dad, you used to make things breathe fire, right? Real fire. I swallowed the ache that lived permanently behind my sternum. Used to, bud. Now I just keep the floors safe so other people can light the sky. That night I sat on the edge of my cot in the studio apartment, the one with the leaky faucet that dripped in Morse code, staring at the ink on my forearm, interlocking prop blades around the word Silent Guardian in a font worn soft by salt water and regret. Hadn't rolled the sleeve up in months. Too many memories. Too much salt in the lines. But Noah had left his sketchbook open on the card table we used for everything. Dinner, homework, model glue. A drone with twin cockpits labeled Eli and Noah in careful block letters. Crayon thrust arrows pointed backward because he'd forgotten which way exhaust went. I traced the careful lines and felt the crack in my chest widen into something that might be hope, or might be the beginning of another freefall. Luis, the tech who'd befriended the boys, cornered me a week later by the coffee machine that only worked if you sweet-talked it in Spanish. He poured 2 cups without asking, slid one across the counter like contraband. That tat. Silent Guardian Squadron. You're the Reed. The one who brought Ghost 7 home through Typhoon Mawar. My cousin was on the Kitty Hawk that night. Said the deck was a washing machine and you still put her down like a feather. I shrugged, burned my tongue on the coffee. Ancient history. Buried in redacted files and salt water. History's why half these kids have dads, he said quietly. You don't just vanish, Mun. You land. Word spread like hydraulic fluid on tile. Slow, inevitable, staining everything it touched. Old-timers pulled up redacted after-action reports on their phones during smoke breaks. A grainy still from a carrier ceremony. My dress whites, medals I never wore, eyes already looking past the camera toward a horizon that didn't exist anymore. Whispers followed me down corridors like wake turbulence, asterisk, that's him. The guy who vanished. Thought he was Kia asterisk. Cassandra caught it mid-briefing in the glass-walled war room. She was halfway through a slide on Q3 burn rate projections when a junior BP leaned over and muttered something about the janitor ghost. She slammed her tablet on the conference table hard enough to crack the screen protector. We are not running a redemption arc for custodial staff. Focus, or find another hangar to mop. But that night she stood in her grandfather's preserved office on the top floor, the one that still smelled faintly of cherry tobacco and possibility. She stared at a framed photo on the wall, him shaking hands with a younger pilot whose face was lost in motion blur. The patch on the flight suit, asterisk Silent Guardian asterisk, stood out sharp against the white. Grandpa had only ever said, "Kids saved my life when the test bird augured in off Guam." Refused commendation. Just wanted to go home to his girl. Cassandra traced the edge of the frame with a manicured nail. The pilot's posture, weight on the back foot, shoulders squared like he was still in afterburner, felt familiar. She left the light on longer than usual, the city sprawling below like circuitry, and wondered why the word home suddenly tasted like rust. The crisis detonated on a Thursday that smelled like ozone and deadlines. Apex's new AI-guided delivery drone, the Pegasus 9, was slated for a live demo in front of venture capitalists, a 3-star general, and a live stream that had already crashed the company's servers twice. Cassandra's make-or-break moment, the one that would either cement her as the heir or prove the board right. During pre-flight sim, telemetry flatlined. Rotor harmonics spiked into the red like a heartbeat in arrest. Engineers swarmed consoles, voices climbing octaves with every refresh. Codes clean, ran it through 3 compilers. Sensors calibrated to micron tolerance. We're blind, systems ghosting its own data like it's ashamed. Cassandra's knuckles went white on the railing, the metal cold enough to burn. Fix it. 6 hours till showtime. Canceling isn't an option. I was wiping condensation off a control panel 20 feet away, close enough to smell the fierce sweat under their cologne, when the waveform caught my eye on the big screen. I'd seen that signature before, feedback loop from a misaligned pitot tube bleeding bad data into the flight controller. At altitude it would tear the airframe apart like confetti in a hurricane. I set the rag down. The handle was still warm from my grip. Excuse me. Cassandra whirled, ponytail whipping like a rotor blade. Nah. Now. The static port's inverted. It's lying to the flight controller about airspeed. Flip it, recalibrate the Kalman filter, you're golden. Dead silence. You could hear the servers humming in the next room. A senior engineer, Dr. Patel, PhD from MIT, Ty Askew, pulled the schematic on his tablet, then the installation photos from the assembly bay. His face went the color of printer paper. He's right. Assembly swapped the tubes during the heat shield retrofit. If we'd launched. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. We all saw the fireball in our heads. 48 hours to tear down, rebuild, and recertify. The demo clock ticked like a bomb with a smile. Cassandra stared at the screen, then at me already walking away, rag back in hand like nothing happened. How did you? Old habit, I called over my shoulder. Ghosts remember. Demo day broke cold and clear, the kind of morning that makes you believe in second chances until the numbers come in. The hangar was packed shoulder to shoulder, suits in Italian wool, brass in dress blues, drones humming on their pads like cage wasps waiting for release. Cassandra's voice carried over the loudspeakers, smooth as runway concrete. Innovation, American ingenuity, the future delivered same day. 70 seconds into autonomous climb, the Pegasus banked hard left, nose diving like it had somewhere better to be. Alarm screamed in three-part harmony. Smoke poured from the starboard motor housing, thick, black, hungry. A lithium flare sparked, then boom. The drone cartwheeled, rotors shredding into shrapnel, debris scything across the deck like buckshot. Screams. Sprinklers hissed awake. Through the chaos, I saw Luis, trapped under a collapsed rigging arm, leg pinned at a wrong angle, fire licking the carbon fiber inches from his face. His eyes found mine across the inferno, wide and pleading. I moved before thought. Grabbed an extinguisher off the wall, red, heavy, familiar, and carved a path through flame. Heat blistered my forearms, peeled paint off the canister. I wedged the rigging bar up with my shoulder, old injury howling like a jet engine spooling down, and dragged Luis clear. His flight suit smoked, his voice cracked. Reed, my leg. Save it for the medics. Kid. Foam rained down in chemical snow. Sirens wailed outside like mourning. As I laid Luis on a stretcher, my sleeve tore clean away on a jagged shard of rotor. There it was, silent guardian blade stark against scar tissue that still itched when it rained. A reporter's gasp cut through the ding. That's the lost squadron. Phones rose like periscopes. Someone found the carrier photo. Me. Younger, eyes already tired, shaking hands with an admiral who looked relieved to be alive. The room went still enough to hear the sprinklers drip. Cassandra stood in the smoke, mascara tracking down her cheeks like war paint, staring like she'd seen a ghost who'd come back to collect. The photo in her grandfather's office clicked into focus. Same stance, same ink, same refusal to smile for cameras. You, she whispered, the word barely audible over the hiss of cooling metal. Later, after ambulances, after statements, after the general quietly postponed judgment and the VCs pretended they had flights to catch, she found me in the parts cage under the mezzanine, stitching a rip in Noah's backpack with dental floss and a paperclip bent into a needle. The overhead fluorescents buzzed like angry hornets. Why hide it? Her voice was softer now, stripped of the boardroom echo. I didn't look up. The needle flashed through nylon. Because metals don't pay for braces. And my boys needed a dad who came home every night, not a headline that faded by morning. She sat on an overturned crate, elbows on knees, CEO armor gone, just a woman in a blazer 2 sizes too expensive for the moment. I thought strength was never needing rescue, never admitting the altimeter's spinning. Strength is knowing when to eject so someone else lands, I said, tying off the knot, and knowing the difference between altitude and ego. Silence stretched, thick with jet wash and regret and the faint smell of burnt lithium. I'm sorry, she said, voice cracking like ice on a windshield. For every word. For every look. For thinking the sky belonged to people who never bled. I set the backpack aside, met her eyes. They were red-rimmed but steady. Fear talks loud. I've heard it in my own cockpit, usually right before I did something stupid to prove it wrong. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking in reverse. I fired 3 engineers last quarter for missing deadlines by 6 hours. One of them had a kid with leukemia. Fear again, I said. Different cockpit, same storm. 3 days later, a cable snapped overhead, heat stress from the fire, missed in cleanup because the night crew was short-staffed and exhausted. A suspended tool rig swung like a wrecking ball straight toward Eli, who'd been showing Noah how to balance a propeller on a fingertip, both of them giggling over the physics of it all. Cassandra was closer, walking the floor in sneakers for once, clipboard forgotten. She dove without thinking, arms out, took the hit across the ribs, and rolled with Eli tucked against her chest like a football. The rig crashed inches away, tools scattering like shrapnel. I skidded in on my knees, heart in my throat, the world narrowing to my son's wide eyes and the woman bleeding through her blouse. Eli's voice was small. She caught me, Dad. Like a parachute. Cassandra coughed, cradling bruised ribs, and didn't let go until I knelt and checked Eli over. 10 fingers, 10 toes, 1 heartbeat racing like a turbine. You okay, bud? He nodded against her shoulder, then looked up at her with something close to worship. You're bleeding. Occupational hazard, she said, wincing a smile. Guess I finally learned how to land. Monday press conference. No podium polish. Just Cassandra in a plain gray sweater, hair in a messy knot that had probably taken 3 tries in the mirror. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. 8 months ago I thought leadership meant cutting dead weight, she began, voice steady but raw at the edges. Turns out the strongest wings are the ones that carry others, even when they're cracked. She introduced me, Jonah Reed, former Silent Guardian, now Apex's first community flight director star. Reporters surged like a tide. I raised a hand, palm out. I don't want a title. I want a hangar bay turned into a classroom. Kids who think the sky's a ceiling, not a doorway. Scholarships, mentors, tools. A place where a test pilot isn't a dream you outgrow, it's a promise you keep. Cassandra didn't blink. Done. 10% of Pegasus profits, every year. We build drones. Now we build dreamers. And we start with the ones who've been told the air up there isn't for them. 1 year later, we cut the ribbon on Skybound Academy under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. 50 kids in oversized goggles launched foam gliders that caught thermals like they'd been born to it. Eli and Noah stood front row, scissors too big for their hands, grins bigger than the hangar. Cassandra wore sneakers and a Skybound t-shirt, hair in a ponytail that swung when she laughed at a 7-year-old who asked if drones dream of electric sheep. I walked the flight line at dusk, palm against the new Pegasus 10 fuselage, Silent Guardian stenciled under the cockpit in brushed steel that caught the last light like forgiveness. Cassandra joined me, ribs long-heeled, carrying 2 bottles of root beer because the vending machine was out of everything else. Miss the stick. Every sunrise, I admitted. But this, I gestured to the lights flickering on in the academy windows, to the mural of interlocking prop blades that wrapped the building like a promise. This sticks longer. Turns out legacy isn't measured in Mach. It's measured in kids who look up and see possibility instead of a lid. She bumped my shoulder with hers. Grandpa was wrong, you know. You didn't just want to go home. You wanted to bring everyone with you, and you're still doing it, one flight plan at a time. Above us, the first stars pricked the indigo like runway lights. Inside, kids who'd never left their zip code plotted vectors on graph paper and argued over whether lift or thrust was cooler. I rolled my sleeve, ink catching the last light. The blades hadn't faded, just found new air to turn, slower, steadier, carrying more than one soul at a time. Ready to lock up? She asked, voice soft as contrails. I smiled, the first real one in years. Let's go home.